1. I blew up a romance scammer's life. This one is fresh and still unfolding, but it's already hit an explosive level. Some details are intentionally vague. Context. I'm a woman in my 30s with a reasonably good corporate-style job in a field with lots of room for growth, and I'm recently back into the dating scene after a decade. I'm kind of a would-be a 10 if she lost 30 pounds looking girl. Beautiful face, if a bit chubby. But I never have issues getting a date. I'm not well off, but I'm stable and have a bit of spending money. I live in a large, multicultural city, and my ex was an immigrant, so I'm open to dating people of any origin. What happened? A few weeks ago, I met a very charming man from a Latin American country, only a couple of years younger than me. Seemed very sweet, cuddly, intelligent, family-oriented, emotionally available, educated, and in a good profession back home in his country, and had a lot in common with me. Chemistry seemed amazing, inside and outside the bedroom. He was honest that he was in my country on a tourist visa but hoping to stay. I made it clear I wouldn't be able to help him with that, but we'd have a fun summer fling while he was here. If he managed to stay or come back, only then would we consider a real relationship. Then the other shoe dropped, a couple of weeks and 4 dates in. During a text conversation about my work, he asked me to be his sugar mommy. I initially laughed and assumed it was a joke. He kept pushing and clearly said it wasn't. Of course, feeling insulted by this, I went off on him. He maintained it as a serious ask, until I hit a nerve with my complaints about how embarrassed he should be to ask me that. Then he got angry and insulted me for thinking he was serious about it. No apology for being hurtful to me. Obviously, what I did next was take screenshots and cry about it to my closest friends. I was hurt that I was fooled into thinking he liked me, and that he thought I needed to pay for a man. My friends started the fuse on what happened next. One of my friends started snooping more in his online presence. Together, we found about 6 different Instagram accounts that were him using different variations of his name, and different photos of himself, all uploaded in batches. On Facebook, a similar pattern, all very scammy and suspicious looking. He had been foolish enough on one of his profiles to follow and tag the employer that he was working for illegally on his tourist visa in my country. So I contacted another close friend in a local law enforcement agency that works with immigration. She looked up his file. He had a wife and daughter at home. I released the hounds after that. The friend who helped me investigate online made several group chats on multiple platforms with all of his family, immediate and extended, and friends. She released all the screenshots as well as a rant about how shameful it was. As they started blocking her, she added more people. I found his sister's phone number. She sent her messages on there too. Everyone he knows, including his wife, know he's unfaithful and trying to take advantage of women. 30 minutes after the online bombardment started, I got a rude message from him about how I should be smart enough to know he was joking, and he doesn't need to sell himself. I didn't reply. Next step? Online immigration reporting form, with all the info we found. Work info, employer name and address, his home address, full name, date of birth, photos, screenshots admitting to working. Usually these reports take months to be reviewed, if at all, but I gave the file number to my law enforcement friend. 2 days later, the law enforcement officers visited him at home. They found him with a phone number that was issued to a local resident. All his roommates also had numbers issued to the same person, a direct link to the employer. He received a caution for trying to scam me and a no-contact order and a flag on his immigration file that, based on his country of origin, will likely mean he can never return, as well as a strict warning to not work without authorization. His roommates also received warnings. His employer received a visit next. They found significant proof that they'd been employing him illegally, as well as multiple other people. Their investigation is still ongoing, but so far they are likely to receive tens of thousands in fines or possible jail time. The guy isn't getting deported because the government would have to pay for it, and proceedings take longer than his remaining visa time, but he is now upgraded from a flagged file to a multi-year ban on re-entry to my country. If he bothers me again, though, he will be deported as well. Hope he enjoys going back to his angry wife and the ridicule from everyone he knows. See you again, never. And just to add, the comments on my appearance are a tongue-in-cheek way of describing how he may have viewed me, and speak more to his failure to select the correct victim profile. It's not that deep, and I don't really care about my appearance very much. 2. This was many years ago, but after reading a food revenge post, it reminded me of a time I had that said revenge. Many years ago, I was working in Killeen, Texas, installing satellites for DirecTV. I was sharing a hotel room with one of the other techs that was actually a friend of mine from back home in Louisiana. He was a big drinker, and stayed up late with some of the other techs in their room drinking. Usually stumbling back to our room and raiding the refrigerator late at night, eating all my leftovers I was saving for another meal. Being that I wasn't making a whole bunch of money, I was trying to be very conservative with my spending. The first couple of times I let it slide, then told him directly to stop eating my leftovers. It continued to happen, but a little less frequently. Then he would offer to buy me lunch if he ate my leftovers. That wasn't really the point. I wanted the food I had already bought. One day, I stopped at a place called No Teeth BBQ. I decided to stop at this hole-in-the-wall place to grab lunch. There was this older black man that was a cook, owner, waiter, and cashier. Probably one of the nicest people I've ever come across. As soon as he heard my Louisiana accent, he started going off all about his family in Louisiana and blah blah blah. We talked for about 1 hour while I ate. Then when I asked for some hot sauce, his face lit up like a Christmas tree. He said, "I got something for your Cajun blood." He came out with 3 old-school squeeze bottles, on which were labeled Hot, Fire, and Dangerous. I asked how hot the Dangerous sauce was. He told me I had to sign a waiver to try it. He was joking, and I got a kick out of his own joke. I'm sure he has been working on that line for a while. He continues to tell me about this dangerous hot sauce and how he concentrates habanero peppers. I, of course, being from Louisiana and loving really spicy food, had to try it. He proceeds to put 1 tiny drop on some brisket I had, and tells me, start with that first and see if I want more. I look at this guy like, are you serious? I thought it was another joke of his. He insisted I try that tiny little bit first, so I proceeded to eat the brisket with that small drop on it. Bruh, I broke out in a sweat. That sauce was so fricking hot he had to bring me 2 more glasses of water and then just a glass of ice. I could feel the heat in my neck. I didn't even want any of the other hot sauces after that small drop. So I finally get over it, compliment him on a good meal and a good time. Ask to take the rest to go. I pack the rest of the food in a to-go box and smother the brisket in the danger sauce, like drenched it all over every piece. I put a lot of hot sauce on. On the way back, I started feeling guilty about what I knew I was about to do, because the sauce was just unbearable. I was having second thoughts, but instead I decided to just stop by a convenience store and pick up some milk and baking soda. Not knowing if that would actually help, but hey, at least it's something. So I get back to the room, write "Do not eat" on the box of food and put it in the refrigerator. We're all hanging out at the pool hall, and I leave to go back to the room early to get some rest. About 2 a.m., my roommate starts screaming profanities and is freaking out. I wake up laughing, but also feeling guilty at the same time. I walk over to the little kitchenette, and he has milk all over his shirt because he was trying to drown himself in it. I was laughing so hard until I saw his face. He looked super worried and in complete pain. I hurried up and gave him the box of baking soda and said, "Here, try this." He literally ripped it open and dumped it all over his face, smacking it in his mouth. I hurried up and grabbed the ice bucket and ran to the ice machine to fetch ice, filled the ice bucket with water, and he proceeded to dump that all over his face and in his mouth. This went on for about 30 minutes until it subsided. When it finally got bearable, I could tell he was absolutely exhausted from the pain. I felt horrible, but I also knew he would never touch my leftovers again. He was big mad, but ultimately apologized for always eating my food. I also apologized for the prank. All ended well. 3. Years ago, when my wife and I first got married, we moved into a 1-bedroom apartment together. We found out later this particular unit had been vacant for quite a while. The woman on the other side of our only shared wall was an elderly woman. She never spoke to us, but was never overtly rude to us. Very quickly after moving in, we received a notice someone has complained about excessive noise. Now, we were young, but we never liked to throw parties at our own house. We went out, so we had never even had people over at this point. So, we were quite confused by this. We called the police, and they told us not to worry too much about it. It must have been a misunderstanding. About a week later, get a knock at the door. It's the police. We open the door to see what's up. They tell us a neighbor has called and complained we were being too loud. We were literally sitting in our living room watching TV. We showed the officers as much, and they apologized and left. This happened several more times over the coming months. One time we came home from a movie to the cops knocking. We showed them our ticket stubs and opened the door to a dark and silent apartment. At this point, the officer said, "Okay, we'll take care of this." I closed the door, but stayed at the door and watched them walk towards my neighbor and knock on her door. I hear them telling her she has to stop calling them for nothing or there will be consequences. After seeing this, we knew for sure who was calling. A few days later, we were parking and saw her pull in right after us. My wife decided to try and talk to her, finally, and see if we could figure out the problem. My wife walked towards her car, smiling, saying hello. This woman locked herself in her car and started crying. We left her be, obviously. My wife went straight to the office to speak to the staff about this issue. I went inside and waited at the peephole. Now, this woman was very old and walked with a walker. I hear the outside door close. I wait a few seconds, and she comes into view on my peephole. While she is walking by my door, I reach back and kick the door with all my might. She screams, lifting her walker up into the air, and screams as she nearly sprints to her apartment. After a few minutes, I get out my vacuum and start running at his cover, because I know what's coming. A few minutes later, sure enough, police are at my door. Lucky for me, it's the same cops as last time. They knock a couple of times, and I shut off the vacuum and answer the door. They apologize for the intrusion, but they have to come and ask if I'd struck the door while she was walking by. I was aghast at the accusation. I say, guys, come on. I would never. What kind of a childish monster would do that to an old woman? I don't know if they believed me or not, but they accepted the explanation. After this final straw, she was not allowed to renew her lease a few months later, and was cited for improper use of 911, and we were granted an order of protection against her. Was I an asshole and super petty? Definitely. Do I regret it? Sometimes. Would I do it again? Abso-fucking-lutely. 4. This happened well over 30 years ago, but it still makes me laugh when I think about it. I once worked for an armored car service, one that was a smaller outfit from the bigger names, and a lot less professional. What I mean by that is not all of the rules were followed as set out by the company. One of the rules was that the courier was to remain in the back of the vehicle and not ride up front with the driver. Spending 8 hours a day isolated in the rear compartment is not very desirable. So many couriers would forego the ride-in-the-back rule and sit up front with the driver, mostly for company. I was no different. Pay me peanuts to guard millions? Ha! We were a 7-day operation, so vehicles were often shared with other crews when one crew were on days off. Leaving the vehicle in the condition it was received was a mainstay. Be respectful of others and keep it clean. Most followed these guidelines, however. There were some crews that were not very thoughtful. Things were going well with the crew we shared our vehicle with, until there was a shift change and another crew came on board. These guys were absolute pigs. I won't get into the condition the vehicle was left in, but you can imagine the mess that could be created by 2 guys in a small space over 8 hours and 4 days. I spoke to them once regarding this issue, and their behavior continued. The courier on the other crew was a bit of an oddball, nice enough guy, just his habits were a little irritating. He had a bit of a Curious George personality, that being that he was always poking things, pulling things, opening things, yada yada. So, knowing this, I planned a tailored prank. One of our clients were McDonald's. I really liked stopping at their restaurants because they would quite often give us free food, which was a positive thing when you're earning minimum wage. One day I picked up pancakes along with a few of their syrup containers. If you are not familiar with their syrup containers, they are little rectangular plastic cups with a peeled back top. By now some of you see where this is going. Trust me, it's far better. At the end of our week, I took a couple of syrup containers, peeled back the top, and placed them on the top of the passenger side visor, knowing the other courier's inquisitive nature would lead him to pulling the visor down, thus depositing the containers with their sticky contents in his lap. I just so happened to have picked up an extra shift the following day, working with a different crew, while the soon-to-be sticky crew were using our vehicle. The day progressed and was busy, and I soon forgot about my prank until near the end of the day, while I was standing in line for the cashier's cage at a downtown bank, when I felt a sharp jab in my back. I turned around to see Dale, the other courier, glaring at me, his hair a sticky ball of mass, shirt and tie covered in sticky syrup along with his pants. "Very funny," he says without smiling, and I had to stifle my laughter. From what I discovered, as soon as Dale got in front of the vehicle, rather than his annoying habit of opening things and poking things, he started punching things. Hard. He punched the visor overhead, and the syrup sprayed throughout the compartment, covering himself and the driver. They had to change over to another vehicle because of the mess. He couldn't complain about what happened because that would mean he was in violation of the rules. "You'll pay for this," he said to me. "Are you sure you want to go that route?" I asked him. I could see the gears grinding in his head, and he didn't say anything as he glared at me. I turned around and finished my business and left. Never had an issue with receiving a dirty vehicle after that. 5. This was over 20 years ago, but when it comes to mind, it still makes me smile. I was 20 and working for one of the largest event staffing agencies in Chicago. They're gone now, but they were number one at the time. And we were contracted to work the opening of a new Nordstrom's on Grand Avenue. This was a very big deal. They needed so many bodies, they also hired several of our friendly competitors to cover all the bases. I was very interested in becoming a bartender, but it was still a few months before I'd be turning 21. The bosses knew this, but were so hard up to meet their obligations they didn't care if I ended up getting what can be aptly described as a crash course. My training for a position of extraordinary craft, nuance, knowledge, and precision was about 45 minutes long, and suddenly I was the only underage professional bartender in the city. I was sanctioned at a specialty satellite bar, which is to say me and one other guy, I think his name was Daniel, had a small bar tucked away on one of the upper floors of a huge multi-story shopping complex in women's wear, with only a few ingredients in huge quantities, and responsible for making only 2 cocktails, the Harvey Wallbanger and the Madras. This was a star-studded event for the creme de la creme of the city, and with the huge volume, speed would be essential, so we pumped out as many drinks as we could for a few hours. So, no one is required to tip, especially at an event where everything is already paid for, but it's a nice thing that encourages prompt and professional service, even favoritism in some cases. And if you were in attendance at this particular event, you for sure weren't hurting for capital. But literally no one would give us $1. We were sweating, hauling, pumping, smiling all the while, and people weren't even being polite about it, let alone tossing us a quarter for what I would describe as a Herculean effort. It was frustrating. Inevitably, someone who just wanted a drink with no baggage came up and asked for just the vodka on ice, and it was a top-shelf product. Grey Goose, if I recall. So Daniel poured them a pretty heroic amount. They walked away without a word, not even a thank you for bending the rules at our own peril. I watched Daniel do this and saw the look on his face, and we caught each other's gaze and had one of those moments where we communicated without a word. We nodded at each other and began our petty vengeance. The vodka, as I said, was all paid for, and we had a lot of it on hand with reserves off the floor, so we started pouring doubles, even triples, pretty much exclusively. All bets were off. Want a screwdriver instead? Have a double. Would the lady prefer a simple Cape Cod? Better make it a triple. It's already bought, so who cares? Just want vodka on ice? Have an entire glass. We're here to serve. No one in charge cared if we strayed from the recipe book, but eventually an event captain did approach us to let us know that someone mentioned we were pouring a little heavy. So maybe pull back a bit. We both said, "Sure thing, boss," and went right on getting people completely schmammered. All sense of decorum and gentility evaporated around the bar, and after an hour we had people dancing in clothes and lingerie they didn't pay for, making out with mannequins, just the works. I know for sure someone vomited in the swimwear aisle. We still weren't making any tips, but it finally felt worth the effort. At the end of the event, when we were breaking down our bar, a younger guy we hadn't served, we could tell because he wasn't shit-faced, came up to our bar and said, "I used to do events. It's not easy. I could tell you guys were really working hard and you deserve this," and tipped us each a $10 bill. He was the greatest capper to a banner evening, and I salute him. The rest of that crowd can pound glass. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 303. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button, thank you. If you'd like to get the videos a little bit early, then you can support me through my Patreon, which is linked in the description. If you throw a few bucks a month my way, it helps me keep making videos and helps me get through these lean times. You'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer Teespring store, which is my merchandise store, linked in the description. We have t-shirts and caps and various other bits and bobs. If there's something you'd like we don't have, see what I can do and maybe I'll be able to add it. And you can also make donations during streams and, oh wait, videos like this one. Huh. Who saw that coming? While you don't have to, I do very much appreciate it. And thank you kindly to those who have. Alrighty. I don't think there's any other business today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: small changes that irritate you that really aren't that big of a deal. I can tell you one that happened to me literally today, and it's a tiny thing, but, right, due to health reasons, I can't really drink a lot of soda. Once in a blue moon I can, but I just can't drink as much as I used to. So generally I just buy bottled water, right? Evian, Volvic, the two ones I like the most. And when they're, sometimes the prices are a bit high because the prices go up and down on these things constantly. But this month I had to get the Nestle one. I know, Nestle, but they were the best deal this month. So they've stopped putting the little carry tabs on the top of it. So the driver then had to bring them in, by just kind of grabbing them at the side. And the plastic tends to rip if you grab them at the side, which had happened to a few of them. And the poor guy ended up, did a good job. Nothing wrong with him. He did what he could with what he had. I had to end up bringing one of them in with bottles having fallen out of it. So I wonder how much money they were saving with those little bits of plastic and paper that acted as the handles. Anyway, let me know what some of your pet peeves are, small things that aren't really a big deal that irritate you, and I look forward to reading them in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.